When we first meet Jacobs in Sedition, he's a cold, unfeeling sentinel of the Foundation. He'll manipulate staff and SCP alike in order to get positive results, not even necessarily for the O5 Council, but for himself. It's not until the 682/079 episode that we see a glimmer of potential humanity inside him, though, like Watch, the audience is hesitant to believe this is a sincere display. However, upon learning slightly more about his history with 049, it becomes clear there is more to Jacobs than meets the eye. As explored at the beginning of the Jacobs Journal series, Jacobs is at this time in his career a Class B Administrative Oversight Officer, working as a go-between for the Ethics Committee and the O5 Council to weed out any unhealthy workplace individuals or operations throughout the Foundation's structure. He arrives at Site 19 to investigate inconsistent output by the current CEO of said facility, Site Director Lambert. Lambert is an egocentric personality, but unlike most other self-centered people who are loose with their power, Lambert has hidden himself behind a web of cohorts, enablers, and frightened staff, all forming a perfect machine working in his favor. While Lambert profits from the site's research personally, he pays for the loyalties of Chief Security Officer Hillard, offers deals to characters such as Sergeant Chen, blackmails and protects monsters like Miles, and rules over workers like Engineer Pinjani Rowe to keep them in line. The discovery of this hierarchy results in Jacobs being abused himself, stripped naked, and forced to endure days inside of SCP-173's containment cell. It is here Jacobs formulates a plan to overthrow Lambert from the inside by using those under his influence against him. By offering freedom to Rowe and the D-classes, brandishing a better deal under Chen's nose, and blackmailing Miles directly, Jacobs forms a team which he hopes will bring about Lambert's ultimate demise. This is no easy task, and places Jacobs in great risk at many points, like when he visits 049 to involve him in the plot. But after over a year of careful scheming, all the players are on board by the end of Episode 10. Episode 11, Calm Before, would have begun with Jacobs, Miles, Chen, and Pinjani meeting in Jacobs' secret nook, where he's been making these recordings since day one. It is here they bond over a shared despising of Lambert, partake in some light drinking, and discuss the plan of attack. We would have learned about Pinjani and Chen's backstories, with the former living in Zambia as a child, escaping hostile militias and losing her brother to them, then nearly being killed by him after he was turned into a child soldier, after which Pinjani's family fled to safety, and she managed to earn a scholarship in America in an engineering degree, where she was eventually picked up by the Foundation. Chen, on the other hand, grew up in China as one in a long line of stoic honor-bound army men, his father being a dedicated general. He even states that his old man really only married his mother out of a diplomatic necessity. Chen flourished by gaining secrets from his superiors, then blackmailing or removing them from office by using their dark histories against them. A disdain for the chain of command saw him rise high and earned him many perks as a part of that status. But he was eventually kicked out of the nation by his own father through official means, as payback for his backstabbing ways, which is how he wound up as part of the Foundation. The irony being that regardless of how high a rank he achieved here, the perks would never be the same, and the consequences far more dire. The plan was to unfold as follows. Miles would trigger a false containment breach event, resulting in Lambert having to navigate his way to a safe zone. Pinjani would not only engineer a mechanism to free 049, but force Lambert's path through the facility to meet with the Doctor. With Chen helping to guide Lambert into the trap, and the D-Class ensuring that the Doctor made his way to the intended destination, Lambert was sure to be killed as a result of the containment breach, and Jacobs need only report his death as accidental and unavoidable. Not long after this is discussed, Jacobs finds out that McCrimmon and the D-Class have been reassigned to different areas in the roster, meaning it will be impossible for them to rendezvous with the team. Instead of overseeing the plan from a distance to ensure his presence is accounted for elsewhere, Jacobs knows instead that he needs to be directly involved with setting 049 free and making sure his rendezvous with Lambert is carried out. The meeting comes to a close, but when Pinjani is the last to head out, Jacobs takes her aside. She and him know that if there is any hope for the plan to succeed, no one is to be trusted, though he believes she is his best ally, and begins confiding in her secret strategy. The tape cuts out to a fateful scene involving Lambert confronting a captured Jacobs, and a deafening rain of gunshots, followed by blaring sirens and loud screaming. Episode 12, The Storm, would have begun the moment the plan was put into action. Jacobs was breaking protocol by entering the containment areas Lambert had specifically barred him from, and would have seen him coming into direct conflict with Hillard. With the help of Chen, Jacobs knocks her out and they stash her away safely in order to enact the rest of the scheme. However, as they arrive at 049's cell and prepare to release the Doctor, Jacobs is captured and confronted by Lambert himself, with a squad of his best soldiers. Lambert gloats that he found all the tapes Jacobs had been hiding away, that he planned to use the most damning ones as a means to shatter the ties between the O5 Council and the Ethics Committee, by asserting the tapes prove that the committee was attempting a hostile takeover of the Foundation and must be liquidated. This will mean no oversight, and Lambert can keep his miniature empire running. Chen betrayed Jacobs to Lambert in exchange for a larger slice of the pie, as well as more freedom to sweeten the deal. Lambert knows what Miles was meant to do, and already stopped him, but wants to know what role Pinjani was supposed to play in this plan. He plays the tape at the end of episode 11, accidentally hitting the record when it gets to Jacobs revising the plan to her. Jacobs refuses to answer, and so Lambert orders to open fire. Before his soldiers can shoot, the sirens blare, and 049's cell opens. Chen is immediately killed by him and turned into a proxy, with the soldiers opening fire upon him. In the chaos, Jacobs escapes with Lambert in hot pursuit. Throughout the chase, Jacobs avoids Lambert's gunfire and weaves through frightened people. He crosses paths with one of the D-Class, who is already dead, and carries on until he reaches an antechamber. Unfortunately, the only exit is locked, and Lambert has Jacobs cornered. Lambert orders Jacobs to look him in the eyes like a man before shooting him. But when Jacobs hears Lambert gasp, he looks up. SCP-173 has Lambert in a chokehold from behind, and the site director has dropped his gun in a struggle to breathe. Jacobs informs him that he knew Chen was a sellout, that he only picked him as an ally and made the tapes to give Lambert a false sense of security, while Pinjani, the only person Jacobs really needed on his side, tripped the containment override protocols manually, releasing the only two SCPs he needed freed: the Doctor to help create a distraction, and 173 for poetic justice. The D-Class would lure the statue to this location, and all Jacobs had to do was wait for the snap. Lambert screams in frustration until Jacobs blinks. He then stands, watching 173 until help arrives, stating that he could do this all day. In the end, Pinjani gained her wish to move on from Site-19 and try to develop more humane ways of containing sentient SCPs, and wished Jacobs luck in finding people he could trust in the future. Jacobs infers to her that Lambert's body was dumped into 682's acid pool to remove any evidence of what really happened. After she leaves, he then allows Miles to be taunted by the childlike voices of SCP-939 before they rip him to shreds. Somebody's Playthings would have taken place shortly after the conclusion of the Lambert saga. Jacobs was still working in administrative oversight, with his current task being to investigate and determine events pertaining to a recent failed mission of MTF Squad Uniform Night Stalker to detonate the nuclear warhead of a black site. MTFU subsequently failed their mission, and the facility was bombarded and sealed off, but not before a sole survivor of the squad emerged, Corporal Isaac Watchhorn. Jacobs debriefs Isaac, where he learns of the traumatic events the investigating team had to endure, the escaped SCPs, Isaac not being able to free his team from a death trap, seeing images of his deceased sister with a dark shadow looming over her, and his eventual, though unlikely, escape. Jacobs admires his personal strength at being able to survive such horrific circumstances mentally and physically unharmed, for the most part. He sees in Isaac potential for great things in other areas of the Foundation, so reassigns him out of MTF duty and makes him an I-class member of the organization. Isaac's new role is to investigate potential sightings of SCPs around the globe, ascertain the nature of the SCPs, get the locals to fall in line with Foundation protocol, and report back all pertinent information relevant to the capture or containment of said SCP. An ulterior motive for Jacobs to help Isaac out is to keep an eye on the unlikely sole survivor, suspecting that there was something more about his abilities than met the eye. It doesn't take long for Watcher's first assignment to come along, involving a brutal murder spree in a small Maine town. Several teenagers were brutally slaughtered, and 2 others traumatized by the supernatural events they had witnessed. Watch investigates, debriefing the survivors of their story. A not-so-distant relative of the male survivor had recently passed away, bequeathing unto him an old, disused firehouse used for storage. The will insisted that he take anything of value before the property was said to be demolished, as part of the conditions of death. Taking his friends to investigate, they found many old-world oddities, junk, and items of personal value for the family. But sequestered behind a hidden door in a sub-basement, not featured on the plans, rested 4 porcelain-faced, adult-sized puppets. Each figure represented a different emotional state: mania, terror, anger, and ambivalence. Though their faces were made of china, worn and chipped, the rest of their bodies were wooden, held together by gears and metal linings, wires that supported them like an exoskeleton. With Halloween fast approaching, the young adults decided to take the puppets back home and set them up as part of a terrifying display. They stored the puppets inside the basement of one of the victims and went about their lives as usual. As time went on, the friends would sometimes hear screaming and howling noises emanating from below, and when investigating the noise, would find that the puppets had moved into positions they couldn't have done on their own. Terror and mania disappeared, with anger and ambivalence remaining, often discovered in stances reminiscent of a standoff. On Halloween night, the male survivor and his friend decided that the puppets had become too much trouble, and resolved to destroy them in a bonfire once and for all. However, anger sprang to life as soon as it sensed the danger it was in, and attacked the 2 men. Ambivalence too became animated, but attempted to protect them by holding off anger. The men escaped the house, with the brawl following them upstairs and causing a fire. Before they could get into the car and rescue their other friends from this nightmare, the front door was thrown off its hinges, impaling one of the 2 men in half against the vehicle. The survivor fled on foot back to his house, where he knew his girlfriend was waiting. When he arrived, she offered him a glass of water to quell his exhaustion while he recounted the story and decided to call the police. What he hadn't realized at the time was that mania had been living inside his house in secret for almost a week, becoming obsessed with his girlfriend. The puppet, taking advantage of his absence that night, had taken the skin of his girlfriend and was wearing it like a suit. Then drugged him in order to carry out an affair by pretending to be a human. After being forced through several trauma-inducing activities with mania, the male was eventually able to escape his confinement by car, soon losing the automaton on his tail. He retreated to the home of his last friend, who herself had been trying to quell the inconsolable terror most of the night, afraid herself that the puppet would slay her in fright. It wasn't long after that the pair were met with a knock at the door, and ambivalence on the other side. The puppet helped terror to its feet, and together escaped into the night, leaving the 2 survivors unharmed. Shortly after, police arrived at the scenes, and the details reached Foundation ears, prompting Watch to make his appearance. Once the interviews had concluded, Watch amnesticized the survivors and collated the data he had obtained in order to figure out his next move in tracking down the puppets. The series follows his and Jacob's interactions throughout the mission, the conflicting moral and ethical implications compared against Foundation protocol, dealing with local interference and an uncooperative containment team when the instances are finally tracked down. Though anger and mania prove to be troublesome, even outright dangers to society, their main goal is to track down ambivalence and terror, apparently the polar opposites of the first two. The latter are far more sensible, with terror only posing a threat when confronted with absolute danger, and ambivalence only using violence as a method of self-defense. Although mania and anger break free of initial containment efforts, Watch actively sabotages the containment of ambivalence and terror, an act that only Jacobs registers. Instead of reprimanding him, however, Jacobs allows Watch to continue, secretly admiring the moral stance he has taken in seeing SCPs as more than just entities to be catalogued. More importantly, is how Watch was still able to avoid being killed during the rampages of the more violent puppets, while many others were slaughtered. Jacobs protects Watch from the eyes of the O5 Council, whilst resolving to watch his career with great interest. The puppets are placed on a record of unlisted SCPs, and Watch carries on to his next assignment.